Welcome back to Inside BBI with John and Eric. We are now going to take a look at the upcoming game against the Texans. And of course, I'm John McDevitt. With me is senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, we took a bunch of questions in our previous video. We're going to talk about that a little bit here, but let's just look at real quick with us. What do we want to see from the Giants going up against the Texans? What do we expect to see? And kind of what are you hoping to get from this?
The big story is going to be Daniel Jones, hence my backdrops. Do we have hope or don't we have hope with Daniel Jones? So this no one has been more analyzed to death on BBI for the last God, I don't even know. It's been more than a year. There's been countless threads over and over and over and over again. I don't even know what people are arguing at this point because there's been no new data
Right, right.
until this weekend. We're going to have new data. We're going to have the ability to see, has there been any improvement in Daniel Jones with hopefully a veteran offensive line? He won't have neighbors, so we won't have that. And of course, I can hear it right now. Daniel Jones doesn't have neighbors, so we can make the excuses. The most important thing out of this game in terms of fan attention is going to be, what does Daniel Jones look like? That's what I mean, for better or for worse, that's what people are going to be focused on because Malik's not playing too. So what is the attention going to be on? Every throw is going to be analyzed to death. Again, good or bad, that's the number one. There's a bunch of storylines for me in this, but that's the one everyone's going to be focusing on.
Yeah, and CMix 3110 has a good question for us that's around not necessarily Jones, but 22 and 24 rosters, which we'll get to in a minute because it kind of ties in with this. First off, again, I am not a Jones apologist. In the past, I've kind of had sort of a middle range and defended him. And yes, for everybody who commented, I do have the two Jones jerseys. I bought them in 2019, for God's sakes. That being said, this is remarkable that he's playing. The dude tore his knee up mid-season last year, and as a running quarterback, which he is, it's pretty impressive to see that he's even able to play come the second preseason game. He probably could have played he could have played in the first preseason game. He scrimmaged with the Lions. He could have played. The fact that he can, that's pretty impressive. Now, does that mean anything about his ability to be a quarterback? No. What it says is he's a tough guy and he's really put the effort in to be back. I do think it's important that he can't look like Drew Lock did. He can't look lost, and that's not. And I'm not trying to be rude to Drew Lock, but Lock made some really bad throws, like just bad throws. What I don't mind if Jones, maybe he's a little off here or there, or the Texans get pressure because our offensive line is still gelling and they're really bringing things. Because I saw them, by the way. I think they played Pittsburgh. They brought a little bit of heat against Pittsburgh, so we want to keep that in mind. They might be a blitzing team when we play them. What I want to see is that his passes are coming out. They're on time. They're to where they should have been. If he hits a defender, just clearly hits the defender, that's not going to go over well with the site or anybody who's a fan of the Giants. And then hope will certainly turn around to despair very quickly. But I want to see competency from Jones, and I want to see him comfortable back in the game because he was, I won't say skittish, but he certainly became a little bit more of watching what was happening and trying to just get rid of the ball towards the end of last year. But then again, how could you not when it was more like the gates being open at freaking the Kentucky Derby? It was like every thoroughbred was on their way to Jones. So that's what I want to see from him. But your thoughts on just the recovery. Like, are you surprised that he's ready to play?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course I am. We thought he was going to be slowly, some thought he'd be on the pup to start, and then he would slowly be, worked into practice. But from the day one, he's been full bore, and he's been getting better. I mean, that's the other thing too. There's been a couple ups and downs with practices, but for the most part, the trajectory's been upward. And the deep passing, which was a problem early in camp, has been getting better. Had another good deep passing day today, perhaps his best in terms of, I think Dan Dugan was the one who was talking about it. The intermediate game, he was really zipping those intermediate long throws in there. So he's it's been remarkable what he's done. He's got to stay healthy. That's a biggie. So if he gets hurt in the preseason again, then the alarms are going to go off. Or God forbid he played like if he played like Locke did, I can't even imagine the meltdown because Locke was dreadful. I mean, if Daniel
He was
Jones
bad.
plays like Locke did, oh my goodness, we'd never hear the end of it. So um, I think this is a great test for them because Detroit is a Super Bowl team. With a team when they played last week was a team with Super Bowl aspirations, but they were playing the backups. The Texans, they're a team that could actually make some serious noise this year, and
Correct.
they have a very, very, very aggressive defense. Um, and they're going to play their starters, is my guess too.
Yep.
So this is going to be a very good team to get a good feel for because they're not going to play. They're likely, even though it's the preseason, like you just mentioned with against the Steelers, they're likely to come after Daniel. And Daniel hasn't always been at his best when he has teams coming after him. So this is going to be a good test for him and for the team. Probably a far better test even though Detroit is a better team, they just didn't play their starters, and so we'll get a better feel for this. So it's a big game for him, confidence wise.
Yeah, and
You know?
quite frankly, I don't know that Detroit is that much better than
Yeah,
Houston. Houston's
yeah,
added a lot of talent.
yes,
They
they
have a
have.
lot of talent. They're going to have it'll be interesting their front, so their line and their linebackers going against our less than gelled together O line. So I do think we might see, and people are going to freak out about it. I'm not going to freak out so much if we've got a couple of mistakes here and there because they're just bringing stuff and our guys are still developing. I will have a problem if one of our guards just gets completely pushed right into the backfield and run over. That's a physical mismatch, and that's a problem. It's
Right.
one thing if you kind of have a couple of mistakes because you just haven't been playing together. Um, I do think we will see what will be interesting for our side of it, though, is the other side of the ball is let's see now when for the first time Burns and Thibodeau on the field together. And then with Lawrence, what can we do to another team's offense? Because I do think we are highly focused on Jones and the offense, saying it's the end all be all of what's going to happen this season. Jones and the offense wasn't even the end all be all in 22. The difference was our defense played sometimes well. Second half, Baltimore, second half, Green Bay playing in London. Great games. Detroit, not so great at home. We gave up a lot of stuff. The Minnesota game, we took the lead. We couldn't keep them from kicking a 60-yard field goal. We couldn't stop them. We let them go down the field and they were able to win. So this defense is going to have to step up and play. One of the big things is play the run. How does it play the run going forward? And let's see our guys on the field. So there is a lot. Will be interesting. I'm not, again, I don't care about the result in terms of who wins the game, but I want our ones to play their ones pretty darn well.
Yeah, and in the past, myself and many other Giants fans have been put our players in bubble wrap. Don't risk Dexter Lawrence. If something happens to him, there goes the season. Don't risk Andrew Thomas. There goes the season. I I think we've got to get away from that mindset and just let the roll the dice sometimes. I think we've got to get ready for the season. And so while you were talking, I'm like, geez, do we even want Dexter Lawrence in there? And I'm thinking, we got to get ready. We got to get ready to play.
Right.
Stop being afraid of everything and just play football and get ready for the season. So there's a balancing act here. How long do you keep the starting? When I say starters, I mean the starters, like the Burnses and the Dexter Lawrences, the guys that you know you can't afford to lose. Do they play a couple of series? Do they play a whole quarter? How do they play a half? That's going to be interesting. I'm not sure I'd play Dexter too long, but I want to see, like you said, I want to see them all together, and they have to learn how to gel together, just like the offensive line. In order to play the run, they have to do that. So I think there's a lot of interesting storylines on defense. Kayvon Thibodeau has been having, by all accounts, has been getting better and better each practice. So we've been talking about Burns, and I think Burns is the better player right now. But I'm very curious to see Kayvon and how Kayvon performs. I'm really curious to see this defense with linebackers with Burns and Bobby Okereke and Kayvon Thibodeau playing together as a unit. I'm very curious to see how do the other defensive linemen play next to Dexter Lawrence. When you have a Dexter Lawrence who's getting double teamed, how does the Ryder Anderson perform? And if Elijah Chapman is going to come into the game early in a pass rush situation, how does he perform with the first unit? And then we got a lot of questions in the secondary. So
Right.
last week we started Deontay Banks, the starter, started that game, and opposite him was Trey Hawkins, which was interesting. So this week I assume, as long as everyone's healthy, it's going to be Nick McLeod. And then, Andrew Phillips has been dinged up this week. If he doesn't play, does Isaiah Simmons start at nickel or slot corner? So there's a lot of interesting stories on defense. And it's going to be a fascinating because the Texans are a good team. This is a good team, and this is a team that
Yes.
could embarrass the Giants. They really could. If we hang with them, that's pretty telling. So I'm a little nervous on the other side of the ball and we can talk about this too in more detail, but I'm a little nervous about the offensive line because, like you said, they haven't been playing together completely as a unit, and this is kind of the wrong team to be doing that against. So they're going to test them. So if our offensive line is able to not embarrass us against the Texans, if they blitz a lot and do a lot of games up front, that's a good sign too.
Yeah, so let's kind of do this. Let's flip to the other side and go, and we'll try to make it quicker so we can hit some of the other questions. But I
Yeah.
want to hit like maybe groups and some thoughts. So my first thought on this too is keep in mind the first game. I think if you correct me if I'm wrong, I think Dable said they had no more than maybe 30 total
Yeah,
plays,
30.
and they were generic plays. I would expect, and I suspect, that we are going to go with a little bit more of our playbook with Jones and the starters. You got to. I mean, you can't not go into a season and haven't even run some of your plays against an opposing defense. So I've got to assume we're going to do a little bit of that. I think we're going to show a little bit, not really maybe exact plays that we're going to do, but show you what we could do. So I think you're going to see a little bit of that, that's going to help a little bit because the Texans aren't going to really have any idea what to see. The Giants last year did not have anything like they have this year as far as skilled players. Now, Neighbors is not going to play, but you're still going to have Robinson and Hyatt now at a level they were not last year. Slayton should play. You've got the veteran in McKenzie. He's going to play. So you've got guys that can run routes and go against these guys. Then you get to the tight ends, and you've got Johnson and Bellinger, guys that we want to start seeing playing. So I think you're going to see a little bit more there. Again, the offensive line, I'm with you, but I'm going to go back to what I said in the previous video. You might struggle slightly on cohesion, but overall, we shouldn't see a huge drop off. These are veteran players. These aren't borderline players. These are veteran players who have started at other teams, and they're here for a reason.
Right. But I will say this, and again, people are going to say, here we go with the excuses. Not having Malik Neighbors in the lineup is going to be a huge difference. Again, people who have seen him have said they have not seen anybody, with the possible exception, and some people have even said he's exceeded Odell in practice. So you don't take somebody like that out of your lineup and not have an impact. It would be wonderful if he plays, and I don't think he's going to, but it would be wonderful if he plays and we see the Giants at full power here. But I don't think so. If they move the ball and they do well, great. But just keep in the back of your mind, this is, again, your best player on offense is not in this game. So that's going to have an impact in this game. So what I hope, I like you, I don't really care about I like the win games, but I
Sure.
don't get bent out of shape over, I've seen people lose their minds over the third string and fourth stringers losing a lead at the end of a preseason game. I've never understood that. It's a preseason game, and the guys that lost it aren't even going to be on the roster. What I want to see is competency, like you mentioned. I think that's the number one word. And this, again, keep in mind, this is a really good football team. And it would not shock me if this is a team that reaches the AFC Championship. I think they're that good. Much depends on if their quarterback replicates what he did last year. But their defense, I mean, they're well coached and they know what they're doing. So this is a good test. It's going to be a really interesting game, and on both sides of the football, and it's going to be interesting.
Well, and the other thing too is keep in mind this is their third game.
Oh,
They
yeah,
they
you're
they
right.
they they
Yep,
played the
yep.
Hall of Fame
And
game.
you always have an advantage with that
Yeah,
too.
and so their guys, a lot of their starters obviously did not play game one, but that means you were already in camp before everybody else. So they played that game. They played a lot of their starters last week against Pittsburgh. So the question will become, how much do they really want to play here? How much are they really trying to show? I think you're home, you're playing the Giants. This is going to be your showcase early. They'd probably go for at least a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, and then they'll probably pull their guys. Well, you don't want to be lose. You brought it up. Someone loses their mind because a third and fourth stringers lost the lead. Lose my mind when somebody gets all excited when the third and fourth stringers come back and win a game that your number ones were getting beat up on early on. That tells me the difference between our ones and our three and fours are not much. I'd rather lose a game because our third and fourth guys just weren't that great, because that means our front end talent was really good and we were really playing guys that had no chance to make the roster. But if these guys in the third and the fourth are battling to make the roster, that means your first line guys aren't that great. So our first need to play their first well. Back to the other side of the ball, then what we need to see is, I don't think the Texans line, I don't think their offensive line is that great. We should see something from Thibodeau, Lawrence, Ryder Anderson, or whoever else is going to be playing there, Nunez, Roaches, and then Burns. I want to see those guys get into the backfield. I want to see Stroud getting pressure. If we just see that, I'm happy, because I don't think the secondary is going to be great with the nicks and dings that we have. That's expecting a lot considering the talent that we're going to be facing coming from the other side.
Yeah, yeah. So the we just want to see the team. I think, from my point of view, I don't want to speak for you, is be competitive with this team. If
Sure.
they are competitive and this is a game, I will be happy because it's a really good team. And I don't know why I didn't think the point you did. I've always noticed that teams that have that extra preseason game generally have an advantage because physically they're more ready to play that game. I think it has a toll on them, into the season because they played that game. But early on, it's like anything else. If you've practiced something any more than somebody else, you're going to be better at it. And they're better. They're more ready than the Giants are to play this game because they've already played an extra preseason game. So that should give them an advantage as well too. I'm not going to. And long story short, I'm not going to make too much out of this game. My eyes are going to be on Daniel, like everybody else's. I wish Malik was playing, and then like you, I want to see the pass rush. I mean, that's going to be interesting. And then how long do you keep them in? How long do the Texans keep them in? And that's the other thing before we get to the questions, I'll throw out there. When you watch a preseason game, you always got to keep track of when your first teamers are in and out of the game and when their first teamers are in and out of the game, because it doesn't always match up. So if our first teamers are playing against their second teamers, take it with a grain of salt and vice versa. So that's don't make too much out of it when those first second teams don't line up perfectly too. You got to
Right.
kind of discount that a little bit.
Right. And I think keep in mind what we just talked about. This is the Texans' third game, which means they may not play their starters as long as we do. So what I don't want to see is, I don't want to see like the offense struggle for like the first quarter or whatever, and suddenly the Texans are starting to pull some of their guys, and then suddenly our offense is now starting to look competent and we're making some passes, because that's a warning sign. That's a sign that says, man, we couldn't compete with their ones. Now that we're twos, we're starting to look a
Right.
little competent. I want to see them. Jones needs to show stuff. It's not just Jones, but let's be honest, it is. I mean, that's the whole point of being a quarterback. Like, you've got to look competent. You can't look incompetent, which is what Locke did. Not to bash him again, but he looked very poor in that game. Jones can't look like that. This is an offense he knows. Yes, he's coming off injury. This is his team. They gave him the money. At the very least, you have to be in command of what's going on. Maybe the offensive line's getting beat. Maybe your running game's not going. That's not your fault. But if you miss guys just, airballing it, or you just pick the wrong guy to throw to, that's a different story. And that's going to be the big watching piece. For you, before we do questions real quick, give me three guys not named Jones that you want to see for whatever particular reason.
Nick McLeod, I want to see Nick McLeod because I think he's pushing for that. So it sounds like Cordell. Usually, when a player doesn't practice at the beginning of the week, especially in a preseason in a training camp situation, you don't see him in the preseason. So I don't think we're going to see Flott. So I want to see Nick McLeod, number one, because he has a chance. He has a chance to start. I'm still. I know I put this guy out there again. I'm waiting to see something from Ryder Anderson. So I'm going to put Ryder Anderson in that
Okay.
group again because he's another one that I got to see something more from him to justify a 53-man roster spot with him. Nick's going to make the team. That's not what I'm getting at. I want to see if he can start, but I
Right,
want to
right.
see more from Ryder Anderson than what I've seen. Let's see on the offensive side of the ball. I've been hyping him, and I think he's going to have a great year. But it's time to see Jalen Hyatt to start to really show why I think he's going to be as good as he is going to be. I want to see Jalen Hyatt. I want to see Jalen Hyatt make some big plays in this game, and that would be my other guy.
I'm kind of with you on some of those, but I'm going to pick others just
Yeah,
because what would be the point if we
yeah,
just said the same thing? I actually want to see first off on the offensive side of things, I want to see Theo Johnson. He didn't really do anything in the first game. He was on the field a little bit more than I think some people thought, but he just didn't really do anything. Now, a couple of times that we just were really bad. I mean, Locke through the interception that takes a whole drive away. Johnson was on the field. I want to see him make some plays. I want to see what he can do. What do we plan on using him? I don't want to see a ton. You don't have to show everything of what you're gonna, but I mean, out of base sets, out of somewhat generic plays designed to go to the tight end, I want to see Johnson. I want to see what he can do. At wide receiver, I want to see what Isaiah McKenzie and Miles Boykin can do with playing time at wide receiver, because that's important. Miles is going to be a guy who's probably, if he's making a team, it's going to be special teams, but I want to see if he can contribute on offense. If he can show some stuff on offense, it makes it a lot easier to really justify that coverage thing that you and I both believe he should be on. Flipping to the other side of the ball, then it really comes down to the corners, I think, and I'm picking two guys from one spot. I want to see Trey Herndon again to be out there. I want to see what he can do as a vet. Is he a guy we can count on to play? And I want to see Trey Hawkins. I want to see those guys playing and where they fit. Herndon's a guy you probably could let go if you wanted to, just because he's a vet and he's got it's going to cost you a little bit more to keep him than over one of the young guys. But he's also a guy that I think you could count on. So you're kind of weighing that. So I want to see those guys. And then kind of pretty much out of everything, I want to see Tommy DeVito with extended playing time again. Can he do it 2 games in a row? Can he
yeah.
look competent? Can he go in? Because that's going to lead into some other questions that we'll get to from some of the posters that I put in there. But it's important because Locke's not going to play, or at least in theory, he's not playing. So if DeVito can really be the backup, at very least, it puts a question out there if you're really struggling to arrange your roster.
All right. And I'll put a couple honorable mentions in there too. Kayvon Thibodeau. So again, supposedly has been impressing. Can he make that next step forward and justify his lofty draft spot? So Kayvon's another one. And we saw a real nice game from Eric Gray, and I think he's going to play more than anticipated now with the injury to Tyrone Tracy. So, can Eric Gray build upon what he did last week? And kind of related to that, I know I'm throwing a bunch of names out there, but this is gonna be the first time we see Devin Singletary as a Giant.
Right.
So,
Who
you know,
played for the Texans last year.
right. So that's going to
So,
be kind of interesting. So the running back situation too is to me is interesting. Again, I know people are going to say, geez, you're making excuses. Just keep in the back of your mind, this is a good team they're playing. This is a really good team, a good test for the Giants, and everything's not going to look great against this. It's great for the Giants to be playing a caliber team like this because it gives them a measuring stick to how far we need to go. If Giants play well, that'll be kind of shocking because this is a good team that they're up against.
well, and keep in mind too, you brought up the position. This is a risky game for the Giants at running back. You've got Singletary, you
Yeah.
got Gray. Tracy's injured. We don't know to what extent yet. Could be minor, might not be minor. Let's let it play out. But for the least, he's not playing. Miller's
Miller.
got a hamstring.
Hamstring. Yep.
He's probably not playing. So you're going to be bringing a guy in who you just picked up to maybe play some snaps and maybe somebody else to play some snaps later, which means Singletary and Gray might be taking on a bigger role in a preseason game than
Which
you
is
might want
scary.
to.
Which is
And
scary.
that's the
And
problem.
that's scary. And so I wonder if they'll throw the ball more than they would normally, just to reduce the workload on those running backs until they get to the point where they get, was it Lingard? I don't even know the roster now.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
just
yeah.
picked up Lingard right now. But do you want to play Miller in a preseason game with a kind of, his hammy is tight, and he didn't pull it. They're just, they're just being careful with it. But do you even want to? I mean, his whole game is his speed. So you
Yeah.
don't want him pulling his hamstring. You don't want anyone, but especially him.
No, because once you start doing that, it can be chronic.
Yes.
Like you got
So
to be really careful, and
yeah,
that leaves us very exposed. I think you're going to see Bellinger. I think you're going to see maybe even a Jack Stoll are going to be playing more H back maybe at different times for protection, because you're not going to want to risk if you only got two backs, really. That's our two
yeah,
guys. We
yeah,
can't risk the two guys that are going to be 1-2 and have them play the bulk of a preseason game.
yeah. They're going to have to. I would be kind of surprised if they don't pick up another back. It's Tuesday right now when we're recording this, so they have no practice on Wednesday, and so they'll have one or two. I think they have one more practice this week. So even if they sign somebody, the guy's not going to be ready. I mean, they may just hand off to him in the fourth quarter, but I think they're going to have to bring somebody in just for a body in camp. But you're 100% correct. This is kind of a dangerous situation for them with the running backs, because you don't want Gray and Singletary to get hurt. You don't want to overwork them in a meaningless game. So we may see a lot of short passing in this game more than they.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There you go. You froze for a second there, but you're good. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing to also kind of look at is with that in mind, keep an eye on the other side of the field. Houston has Cam Akers. He's deep in their depth chart. So let's see when he comes into the game for Houston. What does he do? And the only reason is just keep a mental tally from other teams of players that could get released that the Giants might need to bring in. Vet running backs, I think you're not going to go find another really super young off the street guy. We're going to be going with this roster is unbelievably young across the board.
Right.
But you have a whole position group here, minus Singletary. Gray's in his second year. Tracy's a rookie. He's injured. Miller hasn't played.
They're basically almost all rookies
Yeah.
except Singletary. Yeah.
So and we talked about this before, where I said they might have to scan the waiver wire, and you were like, well, I don't think they would.
Well,
Now
I
because
don't now
of
with
injury, you might have to.
well, I think Tracy, knock on wood, but I think Tracy's going to be okay. Um, and I think it depends on Miller. I mean, Miller looked good. Miller looked good against Detroit. And if you believe, if they really like Miller, they're not going to carry five backs. So it would depend on what you feel about Miller. So if you think you can cut Miller and sign him to the practice squad, I could see them getting another veteran running back. I don't expect that. It wouldn't shock me, but I don't expect that, because I think they like Miller, but I don't know that. I don't know that.
But injury will play a huge role there. We don't know. Yeah, again,
We
hamstrings
don't know about Tracy.
hamstrings are finicky though. You could put him back out there and he could pull it again. We saw what happened with Ojolari with his calf. Oh, he's back. Bam, he pulled it. And he
Oh,
was
now you're
gone for
being gun
months.
shy. I wouldn't
No,
compare.
but you gotta be smart. You gotta look ahead.
No,
So
no,
what I'm
I know
saying is,
that.
just
That's why I
keep a
don't know.
mental tally of some vets that might be available.
I agree, but that's one of the reasons I don't know if Miller's going to play this week, because why risk it? Why even risk that?
Yeah, I
So
don't think. Yeah, I almost don't think he can. I mean, because we don't know what the word is on Tracy. I mean, he was bad enough. You put a air cast on it, which either the Giants were overreacting horribly, or that was legit ugly, and they were like, "Oh my god!" And then they get in there and like it's not a big deal. More needs to be known about that
yeah, I
because
know.
you know.
Or Tracy's a wuss. No.
Yeah, yeah, it's like rub some dirt on it, get back out there.
I'm saying, what do you mean? You get a low ankle sprain. What is this drama? That the
Yeah,
whole thing was weird. We should have talked about it more in the previous video, but whoa, the roller coaster emotions today with Tracy. I mean, I was pretty down today. I at one point you emailed me and you were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." Tracy's, you know. So and then it's like, wait, what? He's okay. So we'll have to see what's going on. But the whole thing was weird. I don't ever recall a air cast being put on a player's leg and him being fine. It's just weird. So
maybe James Caan from the program walked out there. He's
yeah,
like, "Are
yeah,
you hurt or are you injured?"
yeah.
And
Great movie, by the way, if you like cheesy sort of sports football movies, is the
oh
book.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
I actually
Um,
brought that up with John Schmelk once, and he said, that's a good movie. So yeah,
Uh, I always lean a little bit I love Necessary Roughness. I know it's stupid.
yeah.
It's just by the way, Featherstone at wide receiver kind of reminded me of some of the Giants receivers in the past where we had guys like Byron Williams. He made a few big plays because he could fly, but 8 out of 10 times he wasn't going to catch the ball. So you were just hoping I mean, I'm really dipping in now, going way
Byron
back.
Williams has a few of the greatest plays a wide receiver have ever made in Giants history. It's fun.
Back-to-back weeks in
Yes,
1984,
in
Philadelphia and
1984.
Dallas. Yeah.
And it's like, damn. And then he disappeared.
Yes,
So
that he was
yeah.
gone. Solid to me, one of the best catches ever. I can't believe I'm just way off track here. Is in the God, was it 86? It was 86. In a losing effort
Solomon
against
Miller. You're going to talk about Solomon Miller.
Damn,
You know,
yes, yes.
and he's listening out there, Ray in Arlington. One time we were in a bar, and I said, "All right, okay, I have a trivia question for you. There was a wide receiver," and he goes, "Solomon Miller." That's all I said. There was a wide. I'm like, "You son of a bitch! How did you get that?" So that's funny.
Man, you pulled
That's
the
funny.
rug right out. That's exactly where I was going with that. So yeah, and that's another thing too. Just speaking of like careful of the flash plays at points in time where the game really doesn't matter. Again, the second, third. Don't forget. I mean, there was the Alex Bachman cheerleading
Yeah,
squad. It was like he's making the team, and then
yeah.
he gets cut. And nobody
Well, that
cares
was
about him.
weird. That was on all over Twitter too. It was
Yeah,
like Alex Bachman. I'm like,
I think he had like what do you have like 11 or 12 receptions in
I
the
don't
game?
know. He had that one really, really cool preseason game where he just lit it up, and everybody thought,
I think it was against the Jets.
I think
I'm
so
pretty sure it
too.
was against the
Yeah,
Jets.
yeah, yeah,
I think Davis Webb was the quarterback. I mean, right
yeah,
there alone.
yeah,
All I can think of every now and then when people do that is I think back to the 90s and Mike Cherry was the third string
yeah.
quarterback. And every time that guy would play, people were like, "Man, he's got to play. He's got to be I mean, he never got on the field. I mean, he just never got on the field. But
Well, there was Mr. Preseason, Keith Elias. Everybody thought,
oh, Keith Elias.
everyone was so. But anyway, we can keep going on
And
with
and
this.
and don't forget Sean Bennett. Don't
Yeah,
forget
Sean
Sean
Bennett.
Bennett.
We had a BBI poster who compared Sean Bennett to Jim Brown. Believe it or not, he
Oh,
said
they
he's
were
the
both running
next Jim
backs.
Brown.
Sure, sure. They were human beings, and they were both running backs. I got you. I can see where that's close. So to finish up a little bit about the game in particular, and then we'll just jump to some questions, and then we'll wrap that up. We talked about the quarterback pieces. Jones, DeVito, probably not going to see Locke. So that's kind of it on our quarterbacks. DeVito's going to play a lot, which means to me, I think Jones is probably playing 2 quarters. I think he's playing to halftime, unless things are really not going well and he's kind of taking some shots, and then they might pull him. But I think they're going to play him all the way up to halftime.
Yeah, I think the injury situation to Locke is a little cloudy because they made it sound like he was not going to play this weekend, and now they have said they're not sure. So it depends. I agree with you. I think some of it depends on how the game goes. I also think
Do you think some of that's from?
part of this game is going to be important for the coaches just to see. They've got to know what Daniel Jones is okay. They've got what I mean
Right.
by that is it's not just can he hit the open wide receiver. where is he mentally? Can he get hit, get off the ground, and be all right? Because he had two significant injuries. Tearing your knee is a significant injury. A neck injury, his second, is a serious injury. He's got to sort of, I think he's got to prove to himself and he's got to prove to the coaches that he's back. Because I don't want him going into week one against the Vikings with this sort of, can I do it? He's got to get knock the rust off. In other words, he missed a lot of games last year, and so this is kind of, so I agree with you in this sense. He's got to either play a lot this week, or he's got to play a lot the following week, and it's more likely he's going to play this week. I think a lot. So I would play him both. The risk is the injury, but it's like I said earlier. At some point, you just got to say, blanket and play. You just gotta do it. And they didn't draft a new quarterback. They've got to get an answer on Daniel Jones. And even in the preseason, go out there and do your job. Show that you can handle the position. Hope, hopefully the other way. Hope and show you can do your job.
Well, and keep in mind too, right? Like if he is going to play more this week and he plays next week, that means so are other starters. You are not putting Daniel Jones behind your second team offensive line.
And I have no problem with that.
Right. So for a lot of people understand that's a big decision by the Giants. If they decide to do that, that's what that means. That means our team is going to be playing its first team 2 weeks in a row where a lot of other teams won't. I'm fine with it. I think we need to gel. I think it needs to be there. What I don't want is the better of the 2 weeks to be next week against a bunch of backups, because that's not going to tell us anything. Well, so it'll be interesting for this week as far as him playing that half. Then DeVito basically, assuming Locke doesn't play. Now, I wanted to ask you when you were talking about that, do you think Locke by any chance, knowing kind of how badly he played, is kind of like trying to tell the team, no, I'm okay. I want to play. Worried that 2 weeks in a row of DeVito playing a bunch of the game could drop Locke to third at best.
Yes, and I thought Locke was very honest this week with his Q&A with the media. There was a really interesting answer where he said, they asked him if he heard the boos, and he said no, but I understand it because I just thrown an interception, and DeVito's the local kid. He knows. Yeah. He knows that DeVito's the kid, the hometown kid that they're rooting for.
Yeah, he's the underdog favorite.
Yeah. So he's got to come out and he's got to, like you said, he's got to prove. Again, I'm a betting man. Locke's guaranteed to make this team, but if I'm the GM of this team, and I'm not, but if I'm the GM of this team, and Locke has another game like that in the third game, or even if he does happen to play this game, and DeVito does what he did in the other game, I'm starting to say, why are we keeping Locke at this point? So I would think so. And then just, one other comment before we move on to the questions. This may be ego talking here, but I've said all along since the end of last year that the Giants since the middle of last year, the Giants screwed up by not having a physical training camp and not playing their starters in the preseason. I think that was clear, one of the reasons why they weren't ready for the Dallas Cowboys in the early part of the season. I think the Giants have been very physical in training camp this year. I don't know, but I expect the preseason to be different now too. So that's why I expect the starters to play more, because I think whether they agree with me or not, I'm not saying that they're listening to me. What I'm saying is I think they came to a determination that they screwed up last year, and this team wasn't physically prepared to play the first quarter of the season. And it'll be interesting to see how much the starters play in this game and next week, because historically speaking, they won't play much next week, but I'm not so sure now. And when I say I don't expect them to play a half a game next week, but it'd be interesting if they come in out and say, we're going to play them a couple of series, just to make sure that they're ready. I would. I mean, right now, again, things change, but right now, as of this date, I would play Daniel Jones in the next two games and the starters in the next two games. Just at least for a few series in the final game.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think you would spot pull some players. So maybe Dexter Lawrence doesn't need to. This is a guy who's
Yeah,
an
Dexter
absolute
does.
proven
Dexter does.
commodity. No, no
Yeah.
need. Plus, we got to shake out what's happening with the rest of the D tackles. So I want to see them playing it, but you got to mix them in. So I think, and maybe Burns doesn't. I think
Burns is
Thibodeau.
one of those
I think
one of those
Thibodeau
guys
would.
you don't want to mess with. He's ready. Burns
Yeah,
is ready to go, so
yeah.
I wouldn't mess with him too
And I
much.
think Thibodeau, you probably let him play a little.
Yeah, yeah.
And it again, you can't rest everybody, but you got to be strategic. Banks is the guy I worry about a little bit because you played him a lot in week one. I don't want really. You can't have anything happen to Banks at DB. I
Yeah.
think after he plays this week, let's really kind of give him maybe next week very minimal amount of time and let the other guys. We got to sort out the other corners, not only the other starter, but then the other backups. Let that sort itself out. Hopefully, we're healthier next week to be able to do that. So I think there, and then you're looking at running back. I don't necessarily need to see Singletary much because we already know what he is, but I do want to see Gray with the starters because he might play a lot.
Right.
So it'll be picking, but I think Jones has to. I don't think you can. I don't think you can play him this week and sit him next week because you don't. You didn't have the end of last year because you didn't play. You used him sparingly during the spring. Yes, he's played this summer, but he didn't play last week. So you can't go on basically a half a game and go he's ready to go.
That's where I'm at. I could see them sitting them in the final game, but I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I think they can, but I just wouldn't. And I understand the risk. I get it. Hey, if he tears up his knee, our season's over. Unless you think there's a Cinderella story there behind him. I think if you're going to try to compete and win this year, you've got to get him ready. And you can't play it. I guess I'm past now is being afraid. We've been afraid so long about getting players getting hurt, and they get hurt anyways. Just play them, So they've
Yeah.
had a very physical camp, and some guys have gotten nicked up. But knock on wood, we haven't had any major significant injuries. We had a scare today, but that wasn't a contact industry. That wasn't a
That's a
contact. You
odd
know, you know.
injury,
So,
odd injury.
so there. I mean, we haven't had like bad contact injuries in this camp. So just stop being afraid and play your guys, get them ready for the season, and let the chips fall. If you get hurt, you get hurt. And again, I don't want to sound cavalier about it, but it's at some point you got to stop putting these guys in bubble wrap and just get them ready.
Well, and the other thing too is no matter which way you go, you open the door for potential. So if you don't play him, as we saw Andrew Thomas, you don't play him, and then all of a sudden they play in a game, and he just suddenly has to sprint because there's a field goal block, and he tears
Yeah.
his leg up a little bit. And now he's on the shelf for weeks.
Yeah.
That's all from being, again, he's a big guy, probably shouldn't be sprinting and all that stuff. But the fact of the matter is he didn't play much. He really wasn't in games. He wasn't asked to. He's certainly not going to do that in a practice. Do you think if the punt's or a field goal's blocked, he's going to sprint in practice? Thomas is going to leisurely jog and they're going to kind of whatever. In a game, it's a whole different story. So you at some point you got to play. And I think we just have too many question marks, guys that need to play together. So I think you kind of have to. So with that in mind, I mean, we want to keep these tight.
Right.
So I think we've kind of covered this particular game. Let's hit a couple of questions. And one of them in particular, the first thing I wanted to do is the question was brought up. And I don't want to lose who it was. So it was C-Mix 3110. We wanted to have a discussion basically on the talent of the 22 team versus the 2024 team. Where have we grown? He said Shane said there was talent difference at that point, and then 2 years later, we've moved core players from positions like running back, safety, edge, wide receiver, and basically talking about the difference between the two. And I know I have my thoughts on that, and so I'll let you go first.
I don't think fans realize how bad the 2022 team was. I mean, they defense and offense. So Leonard Williams got hurt in the middle of that year. We lost both Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney for the entire second half of the season. And then before that, we ended up having Fabian Monroe playing corner opposite of him, but we went through a bunch of corners before. I mean, there's a guy Lane, something Lane. I didn't remember his name. We were picking up corners left and right. And
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
the
yeah.
cornerbacks that were playing against Green Bay when we were in Europe. Oh my God. It was like, who are these guys? And then we had awful middle linebackers. We had I can't even think of his name now. What is that guy that we let go that Pittsburgh picked up? I can't even think. Our middle linebackers were dreadful. The defense was terrible, and it had no depth on the defensive line. The guys that we would bring in couldn't stop the run at all when they had to get. That's why Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence played almost like an ungodly amount of snaps. And on the offensive side of the ball, you can't even compare the receiver groups. I know that's what you're going to talk about, but the receiving rooms, you and I have talked about. Hodgins was picked up very late in the year, and he was our best player on the team at that point in terms of wide receivers. And so people have over romanticized that offensive line. It was decent, but it wasn't good. Decent may be the wrong word. It wasn't good, but it was just not catastrophic like our offensive lines. So people thought it was better. I mean, people couldn't wait till we got rid of Feliciano and other players on that line. It wasn't good. So it's night and day difference. I mean, we have Burns now, we have Malik Neighbors now, we have Hyatt now. I mean, you can go down position by position. I mean, Bobby Okereke is a huge difference between the 2022 team and this team. So you could go a lot, position by position over this thing. The only place where you might say it's not better, and I know I'm going out on a limb of this. I don't think they're going to miss Saquon Barkley as much as fans think. I think he's going to do very, very well in Philadelphia if he stays healthy. But I'm not like pining for him. I'm just not.
Well, keep in mind too, right? Going back to 22. Here's some of these names. Chris Myrick was a
Yeah.
fullback tight end combination. Marcus Johnson, I've brought up more than once, was a receiver on the team that was playing
There were
snaps.
other receivers like that
Oh,
too.
absolutely. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
Richie James. I mean, Richie
yeah.
James we were counting on
They
early
were
on.
counting on Kenny Galladay, and
And who did
yeah,
nothing. I mean, he was.
and Kadarius Toney, who we dumped because he wasn't doing. Yeah.
So then, I mean, you talk about the offensive line. We had Thomas, which is great, but then which we didn't know was going to be great, by the way. He was still kind of getting there.
Right.
Brednison, Feliciano. I mean, not great. Glowinski never played up to the level that we signed him for.
And our fans on our site couldn't wait to get rid of Feliciano. And then when he started playing decently for the 49ers, they were like, why didn't we keep him? They
Right.
didn't
Oh,
say that
see,
when he was
yeah.
here. So
Again, and I can't say this enough. I don't know why some people just can't get the concept. Again, if you surround him
good
with
players.
really good players, his deficiencies are minimized.
Right.
If you surround him with average to below average players, his deficiencies are exposed.
And good
And
coaching.
and yet he was still one of the better players from time to time in that
Yeah.
group. I mean, that's just high
And
level.
Evan Neal was a disaster that
And
year.
Evan Neal was a disaster. That's high level. Jalen Smith, a guy that had at one point basically was off the Cowboys because he had a degenerative knee condition.
Yeah.
So
And
Tay
sorry.
Crowder. Tay Crowder, I think was
That's
the
what
right.
I was Tay Crowder.
Yes.
But they also had the guy who started a few games. Oh God, Calitro? What was it? I can't remember.
Oh yeah.
He started a few games, but our middle linebackers were just garbage. And they remember Bellinger was starting as a rookie who was not, in a normal situation, Bellinger, his background, his collegiate background, you wouldn't expect him to start.
Right.
And when he got hurt, it was a disaster for us because we didn't have anything else at tight
Because
end.
we had
the team was,
Myrick,
yeah,
Tanner Hudson.
yeah,
Yes, he's bounced around the league. He's still in the league, but I mean, my gosh, he's
yeah,
never going to be a starter.
yeah.
Keep in mind, Kayvon Thibodeau, if I remember correctly, didn't he get hurt at the end of the preseason? So he
Oh
didn't.
yeah, serious.
So he didn't play.
We thought that was a serious knee injury.
Yeah.
It looked like his knee buckled, and we thought it was an ACL. So we
And
were
did
like,
he miss the first? Did he miss 1 or
he
2
was
weeks?
limited. He was limited. But they had it wasn't just the roster was bad. A lot of their most important players got hurt. I mean, Xavier had the ATV accident. They
Yeah, that
again,
was.
Adoree missed the whole second half. Leonard Williams, for the first time in his career, missed a bunch of games. It was bad. I mean, that roster was not good. It was a miracle that team not only got in the playoffs but won a playoff game.
We had
It really did.
we had Henry Mondo on the defensive line at one point.
Right.
Fabian Morrow
That was
was
the guy who was that was the
play
guy who was
corner.
starting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he yeah, it was bad.
So when you look at that, right, and it's something
Justin
that
Lane, is that the other corner? Was he on that? Was it Lane? Anyway, there were a bunch of corners. I went back and looked, and there were like we went through corners like crazy until Fabian took over. But anyways, it was a revolving door at that other corner spot. So and if you go back to the Green Bay game,
yes, it is Justin Lane.
yeah,
Yes.
it was terrible in the Green Bay game because they were like it was a miracle that you they were out there against the quarterback who they were against and they held their own in that game. It was amazing.
Well,
So
I think about it too, right? We had Aaron Robinson. He played 2 games. You also had Rodarius Williams,
yeah,
who basically started 1 game.
game.
Um, Adoree Jackson only played in
Yeah.
10 games. So one of the things, and it's bothered me so much when you try to have a conversation about Daniel Jones on the site, a legit, let's have like a theological discussion of playing the position of quarterback, and everybody just wants to absolutely shit on it. And it's just like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
stop. Look at what we were just talking about.
Right.
I'm not saying Jones doesn't have his deficiencies or he did not play to some of the levels you want, but if you go back to 22, he had 15 touchdown passes, 7 rushing touchdowns. So he contributed 22 touchdowns. The bulk of the second half, and yes, people will equate, well, we lost a bunch of games. I understand that. But it wasn't just because of the offense that we lost those games. The defense did not play well in a number of those games. We seemed gassed in a number of games. But we didn't have anybody on offense. Jones suddenly became the guy. He was running the ball a lot. They were asking him to do a ton. Look at the game against Indianapolis. Look at the earlier game against Chicago. He was carrying the ball a ton in that game and throwing in the game. Indianapolis, the same way. The Minnesota game in the playoffs, he was a one-man crew. Look at the numbers he put up. Yes, Minnesota's defense was pretty bad. But that wasn't Barkley ripping them for 200. That was Jones throwing for 300. Jones running for like 80. I mean, it was a really good all-around game. And you ask yourself, if we moved the talent, so the question becomes, compare 22 to the talent of 24. If we take the team from 24 and we drop it into the 22 season, new offensive line full of vets we believe are going to be better. It's unproven at the moment. We believe are going to be better. Neighbors, Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, who got hurt. You get him, and then you put Hyatt, and you put those guys in 22. Our offense is way better than what we had in 22. It's night and day better.
All right.
So,
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so you can't. Someone said, have we seen the best of Daniel Jones? And then, of course, you get the one person who goes, oh, yeah, 5 years into the league, 6 years. Of course, why wouldn't you wait? Again, yes, he struggled. I get it. I totally get it. But our team has sucked. I mean, completely sucked. If he's 22, I think his rushing touchdowns go down in 24. I think they go down. I think his passing touchdowns go up. We need, instead of 22 combined touchdowns, 15 passing, 7 rushing, we need 30 touchdowns coming from Jones. And I don't care ultimately what the combination is, but it's probably got to be more like 24, 25 passing touchdowns. And we will see much better results. That should change a lot of things. Does it mean I'm sold on Jones overall, that we can't have a better quarterback? No, I still think we might be able to find a better quarterback, but he might be what we're going to have to deal with for the next few years. So we want him to produce.
We have to have hope.
Hope's a dangerous thing.
Hope's a dangerous thing. So I don't want to spend too much time on this right now because we're going to go too long. But I'll say what I said before. Why the Daniel Jones debates annoy the crap out of me right now is there's truth on both sides, and either side won't admit the truth, the partial truth of the other side, and it drives me crazy. And and so you got people out there to be nameless saying, well, okay, we're going to have to go another year to find out whether he's the
Right.
real deal or not. Well, we're there already. It's too late. They couldn't draft or wouldn't draft the new quarterback. So we're here. So accept where we're at. There's no, you know, we've got to move forward at this point. And then it's pretty clear from Hard Knocks, they tried to upgrade the quarterback position. They didn't get the guy that they want. I hate this argument about you got to you got to be fully in love with the guy in order. Yeah, you do have to be fully in love with the franchise quarterback if you're going to draft him. Yeah, you do. You don't just throw darts at a dartboard at the number 6 pick. That's insane. So yes, you have to kind of be in love with the guy that you're going to draft. So I hate that argument. There's truth on both sides. I am not overly optimistic about this, but I will not, and I've said it before, I will not be shocked if he has his best season because the surrounding talent around him is the
Sure.
best that he's had. So we're going to find out. And he's got to stay healthy, and then he's got to perform. They're down by 6 points and they're starting at the 23-yard line and there's a minute and 37 seconds left, he's going to have to drive the field and get
Yeah.
them in the end zone. And that's what it comes down to. And that's where we were with Eli Manning for years up until even for much of 2007. I mean, he threw a huge number of, 4 picks against the Vikings, and we were
Oh
like,
my God.
it was like 3 of them went for
For
TDs.
touchdowns. Oh,
It's like, done, we're done. But that same year, they went to the Super Bowl. So I'm
right.
not saying Daniel's going to the Super Bowl. I'm just saying, dude, the ball's in Daniel's court. He knows this is it. So if he doesn't perform now or he gets hurt again, he's toast. So this is the beginning of his journey on Saturday, and he's going to have to say number one, he's just going to have to stay in the game. He's going to show he can take a hit, stay in the game, stay healthy. If he starts getting hurt again and missing games and stuff like that, they're going to move on. And then if he can't perform, they're going to move on. That's where we're at.
And there's a possibility that they're going to move on regardless, unless it's so over the top best year and the result in the win column is X. They may have already decided deep down, we want a guy. They're unlike some people on the site who seem to think like, well, you just take a quarterback anyway. But it's always funny that it's take the quarterback that they wanted to take, not as
Yeah.
when you juggle the board, right? Like they obviously had Daniels again. We've
No,
talked
I
about
wouldn't take Knicks. I'm going to take Penix. I mean,
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, it's like,
you know,
first off, I mean, you can't do that because all you would have done is you're taking now your third or fourth quarterback, and that's clearly where they would have been. We know the 3. It was Williams.
it would be the fourth. It would be the fourth quarterback.
Yeah, Daniels
In a
was
6-player draft, you take the 4th quarterback.
right, and not,
and you can trade down because those quarterbacks run right after that too.
Right, and we're talking about not just the 4th quarterback taken. This would have been their 4th choice at quarterback. They wanted Williams, but he knew he was going to be gone. Daniels was Dayball's guy. If he's like, yeah, I'll trade up for Daniels. And then May was I think where they were like, okay, we like May. He's the next option. He's the one that technically we think could be available with a trade. That didn't happen.
And now McCarthy's going under knee surgery. So
you don't just go, you don't go McCarthy if you're not sold. You don't go Penix if you're not sold. You don't go Knicks if you're not sold when you've got what they consider to be an all-pro potential player that would improve the overall roster. If you take your 4th quarterback in the draft, and I mean your 4th option at quarterback in the draft, you've basically put this guy in, you've lessened the talent pool that he can throw to, which wasn't great. You need somebody to make those other guys to be better, and we didn't have it. Now we do.
Well, what it comes down to is quarterback hell exists, but there are people out there that won't accept that. There can't be quarterback hell. We can always find a solution to this. The solution isn't always there. There is a reason why there's a thing called quarterback hell, and we're in it right now until Daniel Jones or somebody else comes along and fixes it. And you can't just wish your way out of it or say you can do it. Oh, there's always a way. No, there's not always a way. That's not the way this works.
Well, yeah, so, I agree. Minnesota's going to start Sam Darnold. I mean, how many teams has Darnold been on? Tampa Bay is playing Baker Mayfield. How many teams has Baker Mayfield been on?
And you know what, I'll say this, and I'm not a big Sam Darnold guy, but in that offense, Sam Darnold may not be a disaster. He may not, because he's surrounded by talent now. So
That's
he could have his best. He should have his best year.
See, and that's the point. That's the point I was trying to make too. Is like Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. Do I think Baker Mayfield is a great NFL quarterback? No,
I
but
would.
you give him Godwin,
Yeah.
Evans. I mean, they picked up multiple tight end,
That
young tight
offensive
ends,
line they have in Tampa Bay, yeah,
very good, and
yeah.
they maximized. So he became more than acceptable with the talent. But if you take Evans off the field, you take Godwin off the field, Mayfield's nothing. That's why he's bounced around the league. So yeah, I agree with you. There is that situation. I think to go back to the overall, comparing the roster, flip it to the other side of the field. We had Jihadi Ward, which was out there. Our D line was average at best. Thibodeau was kind of learning. He was up and down. He was good, but there are other times he wasn't. He was kind of invisible. He's a one-man gang too. Ojulari was injured. Our inside linebackers weren't that great. We just talked about it. Jalen Smith was out there. Tate Crowder was out there for a while.
I don't know how that team made the playoffs.
Yeah, and our secondary. I mean, we put together. I mean, literally, it's like a scene from Fletch. He's like, what do you got to do to keep it together? Give me some baling wire and some duct tape and baling wire and some WD-40. That's how we got through the Green Bay game. Who knew who was playing secondary in that game?
They got to the playoffs because they upset so many teams in the first half of the season, and they hung on for dear life and beat some bad teams at the end of the year. And they got hot against the Vikings twice, and they almost beat them the first time, and they beat them the second time. But that team, that I guess it's more remarkable is that team went 6-2. That team went again, and they beat some good teams in that.
We beat Tennessee at Tennessee.
Yeah.
We beat Green Bay. We beat Baltimore.
And the injuries hit our team hard in the second half of the year. And people were like, well, Brian Daboll is only his record since going 6-2 is, well, they're putting in that year, that injury riddled first year in that. And it's a miracle that they got into the playoffs.
Well, it was a horrible roster.
Yeah.
So this is why I think, and I said this before, and I know you can. The last thing, real quick though, I'm on Jones. I'm going to say this thing about Jones. There can be two completely competing and opposite statements, and they both can be true.
Yes.
He's not played to the level that of a guy where he's drafted yet. We have not seen the kind of play that we thought. He can also be hindered because of the fact that he's played with absolutely nothing. Both those statements are true. It's just which one is more true, and we'll find that out this year. So
it's so tiresome to hear that debate. So at least we'll have new data. We'll be able to react to what happens on Saturday. So it'll be analyzed as that. So that's a nice way to close that argument.
Yeah, and the other thing for me is on Daboll, and I said this, and I know the argument can come back to me. You've said the argument back to me about other games. We could have won 8-9 games last year. We could have lost more. I totally get that. But if you compare it to 22, the teams aren't that different. The difference was our offensive line was just even worse than it was in 22, and that led to the quarterbacks being beaten up and injured and whatever. But the fact is, we should have won the Buffalo game. We were in that game. We should have won it. There should have been a penalty at the very end of the game. Horrible play calling at the very end of the first half. We should have won that game. We should have beaten the Jets. Yeah. We should not have lost that game to the Jets.
But New England should have beaten us too. So I think it evened out. I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you, but it's.
But my point is, though, that is Daboll's coaching, even with shitty rosters, I think he's done a good job of keeping those things together. We could have fallen off the cliff. Now, some people would be like, we should have fallen off the cliff so we could draft a guy. You can't start doing that 4 or 5 weeks in a season and go, I'll just take it the rest of the year. This isn't the NBA. Who gives a shit? Like when they just give them, they don't play players. You can't do that. He's kept it together. What do we do with a roster that's improved? That's what I want to see. And I like the coach. For the most part, I like the coach. I like the GM. I know some people don't. I do. I think they work well together. It's just last year, I think Wink was the big issue last year. I think his arrogance from the first season was misplaced based on the fact that our defense was average at best. We got a lot of turnovers, but you can't live off turnovers. You have to live off stops and changing games, and we didn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that clash. Let's see what happens this year. I know it's unproven,
All right.
but I just feel good about the coaching staff. I think if we coach the way they have in the past, they keep it together, and the talent improves enough, which we think it is. I'm going to go out on a limb right now. I'll say it right now. This is at least a 9-win team. They will
Really?
win 9 games. I think they'll win 9 games. Keep in mind, everything that everybody worries about the Giants is very myopic. It's very Giants focused. But if you look across the league, I'm not sold on Minnesota. Minnesota's defense has not improved. It's
Right.
regressed and it wasn't good. Their defensive line is average at best. They lost their best pass rushers, average at best. You look at within our own division, Washington, can they be better? I think they can be better. Can they be worse? I think they could be worse. We don't know what they have. And I'm not sold on Philadelphia and Dallas maintaining the level that they were. Are they better than us talent wise at the moment? An argument would to say that would say yes. But Philadelphia has internal issues. Dallas has a lot of questions with a lot of contracts and a lot of players that they're counting on that have been injured, that have not performed in the last couple of years, and they choke a lot. That contract with Prescott's going to be a big deal, especially if Lamb doesn't get done.
All
So
right.
there, you look across the league, we have teams that we're going to play, and who knows what they might be like down the road. Injuries are going to play a factor with everybody. I'm not sold that we are that weak against some of the competition that we
All right.
have.
Young team with new coaches at key spots, so it's going to be rough. The early part of the schedule, I was looking at it again yesterday, and it's like, geez, if they can survive the early part of the schedule and play somewhere near 500 football, I think they'll be okay. Um, but new defensive coordinator, new special teams coach, very young team. We're better, but I see some of the teams that we're playing are also kind of scary too. Cleveland Browns, there are some physical football teams we're going to be playing early on that we're going to have to show up, and we're going to have to, if we can steal some wins like we did in 2022 early on, I'm all on board with you. I think this can be a 9-win team and actually push for a playoff spot, but we're going to have to steal some wins, I think, early on
Sure.
when nobody is going to give us a chance. No, everybody's going to, I mean, there's still much. Again, I don't even bother watching them anymore because they're horrific. But when I'm out like at the gym or whatever, and I see ESPN, they mock the Giants all the time. All these national pundits think the Giants are going to be garbage. And until proven otherwise, they're right. They're going to, you 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 don't want to be treated like that or considered like that, then
Sure.
then then you got to prove it. So I think there's enough talent on this roster to I think we're going to surprise some teams. I
Sure.
think some teams are going to, at least some fans. I don't think a lot of fans realize the Giants have some of the players that they have on their roster right now.
So we'll keep this fairly tight, but I'll
Yeah.
say this to what you just said. How many of those pundits in 22 thought this team was going to be any good?
Oh yeah, no,
And
no.
this is a better team than it was in
Oh yeah,
22.
it's a better team. You can't argue this is a worse team. You just can't. I mean, again, we don't know if there's what's going to happen between now and the start of the season. If they start getting major injuries, things will change.
Sure.
But right now, as it stands, there's no comparison with this team. I guess the answer the question, there's no comparison with this team with the other. I mean, this team is so much better than the 2022 team. Um, you just look at the roster; it's night and day better.
So we could do some other things. I think we've probably done enough
Yeah.
for this. So we want to wrap this up. So for the Texans game, as we've already covered, expect the starters to play a decent amount. Jones probably the first 2 quarters, we think, and a lot to watch. Let's see what happens at running back. There's a lot of injuries there and how they play that out. And then with Neighbors out, can Hyatt step up? Those kind of things. So do we want to drop a little hint on when we do our review of what we've got coming up this weekend, or should we save it for later in the
Oh,
week and
sure.
talk?
No, there's two
Yeah,
things. So, right now we got Cy coming on for the game review after the game. So, again, things can change with schedules, but he said he will come on, and I think we're recording that on Sunday morning or
correct.
Sunday
That
afternoon or
no,
morning.
Sunday
No,
morning. We're doing
Sunday
Sunday morning.
morning. We're going to
Yep.
record it on Sunday morning, and then you were talking about the upcoming draft, we're going to have Colin from the Great Blue North Draft Report do a show for us before the end of the month. So before the college football season starts, and I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions about cornerbacks, defensive linemen, and other positions. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
I expect that we will be able to announce next week. I think on Tuesday, once they make the announcement on the next set of the top 100, I believe the Giants are now doing, is it 30 on down? I think it's 30 to
they
21.
just announced 31 to 40. I think they just came out
Yeah, or
today.
in reverse order, 40
Yeah,
to 31. So it
yeah.
should be 30 to 21. And I expect that announcement will include the player that we will be having on. And he's made it clear. We wanted to time it with that. So we're going to do our best to mirror that up and get that done. I think I think folks, if you've been fans of the Giants for a while, you'll know this player, you'll have known his career, you'll be happy to hear from him. I'm excited I got to talk to him on the phone 2 weeks ago. So I'm pretty excited to have him back on the show and to cover that. That'll be a big deal for us. But any last parting words?
No,
Tell
no.
people just stay off the ledge, folks. Stay
The
off
only
the
thing I'll
ledge.
say is that we're trying to keep these shows shorter. We're failing miserably. I apologize, but John and I get talking, and I can't believe, we're going as long as we are, but it just doesn't seem it. So I apologize. We're trying to keep these tighter, but it's fun.
But it was good. We appreciate the questions. We will do it again, and the questions. And so, if you have further questions, we can also just address them after the fact. But yeah, so for Eric Kennedy, myself, John McDevitt, you've been listening to Inside BBI with John and Eric. Please like and subscribe, and then comment, and we'll catch you up again coming this weekend after the Texans game.
Thanks, everyone.